Afghanistan is a land where nature and time have intertwined into an inextricable knot. Its harsh, untouched mountains, vast deserts, and deep gorges have always been a source of secrets and mysteries. For centuries, this land has remained the arena of struggle of great empires that sought to conquer it. At the same time, the Afghan mountains preserve something more than just stories about warriors and conquerors. Their heart hides dark legends that awaken fear even in the most experienced people. Among the numerous stories about this region, a special place is occupied by stories about giant creatures that, according to legend, live in the mountains. High mountain ranges rising to the sky create a natural fortress inaccessible to ordinary people. Here, in inaccessible gorges, local residents have talked for centuries about mysterious creatures, giants. Local legends say that these creatures are not just large men, but something much larger and more terrifying. They possess strength beyond human imagination and live in caves deep in the mountains, where no one can disturb them. Their appearance is described as frightening and otherworldly. Red hair that falls to their shoulders, 6 fingers on each hand, and blazing eyes that are said to be able to see through the darkness. The legends of giants are not random inventions. Local shepherds who spend their lives among the mountains tell of seeing huge silhouettes moving on the slopes under the cover of night. Others recall strange sounds coming from the caves, heavy footsteps that resemble thunder, and a loud roar that caused animals to panic. These stories have been passed down from generation to generation for centuries, becoming an integral part of the local culture. The inhabitants of the mountains believe that these creatures are part of nature, protectors of the mountainous regions, and that any attempt to disturb their peace can lead to tragedy. However, the real mystery began when modern military missions began to confirm these ancient legends. American soldiers deployed in Afghanistan told of encounters with creatures that outwardly matched the descriptions of local giants. In these stories, the line between myth and reality disappears, creating even greater intrigue. The Afghan mountains are becoming a place where reality and legend, modernity and antiquity intersect. What do these peaks hide? Giants? Forgotten creatures from another time? Or maybe the mountains themselves are alive and remember more than humanity can imagine. All these questions remain unanswered, but the mysteries that this remote region holds are attracting more and more adventurers and explorers. If you want, I can expand the text even further or add more details about local legends or the peculiarities of the mountainous terrain. During the fighting in Afghanistan, among the endless deserts and steep mountain slopes, a group of American special forces, accustomed to the tension of war, unexpectedly encountered a phenomenon that exceeded all their expectations. This event forever changed the lives of each of them and left an unforgettable mark on their memory. Their unit was tasked with conducting reconnaissance in a remote and inaccessible area located next to one of the highest mountain ranges in the region. This area had long had a dubious reputation among the local population. Residents warned, "It's better not to go there. These mountains hide evil spirits." The soldiers took this as ordinary superstition, but the warnings turned out to be not groundless. During the task, the unit came across a narrow gorge that looked like an ideal place for an ambush. It seemed that danger could lurk anywhere, but none of the soldiers even imagined what awaited them ahead. On the ground, they saw strange footprints, huge prints much larger than a human foot. Their depth indicated that the creature that left these footprints had incredible weight. Alarmed, the soldiers continued their journey, remaining in full combat readiness. The silence that had reigned around was suddenly broken by a low, powerful roar that sounded from the depths of the gorge. It seemed that this sound came from the very depths of the earth. The heart of every soldier froze, and adrenaline filled their veins. And at that very moment, right in front of them, a creature appeared that seemed to have come out of the worst nightmare. Something incredible appeared before the unit, a giant, more than 4 meters tall. His long, red hair fell over his broad shoulders, his eyes burned with ominous fire, and his massive body radiated strength. The creature had 6 fingers on each hand and foot, which made its appearance even more unusual. The giant held a huge spear in his hand, which seemed to be made of super strong metal. The soldiers, trying to remain calm, instantly took up positions and opened fire. But the bullets that usually stop any enemy seemed powerless against this creature. The giant moved with incredible speed, not matching his enormous size. His attacks were cruel and accurate. He easily snatched weapons from the soldiers' hands and threw them aside like toys. The battle lasted several minutes, but for each soldier these minutes seemed like an eternity. The giant demonstrated unwavering strength, and victory seemed impossible. However, one of the soldiers, risking his own life, managed to make a precise shot to the creature's head. The giant fell with a loud thud, raising a cloud of dust around him. After the battle, the unit stood in silence for a long time, recovering from what they had seen. Before them lay a body that defied rational explanation. The creature's skin had a rough, charred texture, and its features were so inhuman that it seemed as if they had come into contact with something from another world. The unit commander immediately called for reinforcements. A few hours later, a helicopter arrived to evacuate the giant's body. It was sent to a secret facility, and each of the soldiers was forced to sign non-disclosure documents. Later, they were interrogated by special agents who asked in detail about the events of that day. This encounter raised more questions than answers. What kind of creature was this? Where did it come from? Could she be a remnant of an ancient race that once existed on Earth? Or perhaps a representative of another reality? The answer remains a mystery, but for those who witnessed this event, reality changed forever. The evidence of the existence of giants in Afghanistan is not limited to the stories of those soldiers who were directly involved in encounters with these creatures. Other military personnel, including pilots, medics, and even employees working at bases outside the active combat zone, also participated in these mysterious events. Over time, their stories began to surface in interviews, indirect accounts, and anonymous testimonies. One such witness was the pilot who evacuated the bodies of the fallen giant. According to him, it was a load that he never expected to see in his military career. The man described in detail how a huge object was brought to the runway in front of him, wrapped in several layers of coarse tarpaulin. Its dimensions were so impressive that the helicopter, designed to transport heavy loads, could barely lift this burden into the air. The pilot recalled how, during the flight, he paid attention to the crew accompanying the cargo several times. Their behavior was extremely tense, and their facial expressions were stern and focused. One of the soldiers even joked that they were not transporting a body, but a piece of a mountain. However, everyone understood. It was a terrible and unusual moment that they would never forget. Additional testimony came from the ground personnel of the base, where the giant's body was temporarily stored. The guards on duty that night later told how, during their shift, they heard strange sounds from the room where the cargo was located. According to them, these were low, drawn-out moans, similar to the sound of wind breaking through the gorges. However, this area of the base was protected and hermetically sealed, which made such sounds incomprehensible and alarming. Another important point concerns the local population. When the soldiers cautiously tried to ask the Afghans if they had seen anything like it, some of them confirmed that giants were part of their reality. The locals told legends about the mountain people who lived high in inaccessible gorges and avoided contact with humans. One such story was about a shepherd who once saw a giant come down to the river to drink water. According to the witness, this giant had bright red hair, and his arms and legs were covered with rough skin that looked like stone. Other witnesses, including veteran soldiers, recalled cases when, while patrolling the mountainous terrain, they found strange settlements that clearly did not belong to humans. Huge doorways in the rocks, the remains of hearths, the traces of massive feet on the soft soil. All this made us wonder whether creatures that people could not understand or explain really live next to us. In addition to military testimony, there are also stories from the civilian population. Some Afghans who grew up near the mountains claimed that giants were not only part of local folklore, but also real creatures. They warned that it was dangerous to approach certain gorges or caves because spirits dwell there. This is what the Afghans sometimes called giants. Despite all the diversity of these testimonies, many details coincide surprisingly. The description of the giants, their features, incredible strength and aggressiveness is repeated again and again, like a chain connecting all these stories together. The similarity in eyewitness accounts makes us think that giants are not fiction or myth, but perhaps a real part of the world that has remained hidden from modern science and civilization. Despite the official silence and denials of the military and governments, these stories are passed down from mouth to mouth, gradually becoming part of modern mythology. Those who witness such events are often left with mixed feelings, from fear and admiration to the desire to understand the nature of these mysterious creatures. But one thing remains unchanged. Their testimonies once again confirm that the world is full of unsolved mysteries. Stories of giants like those told in Afghanistan have deep roots in world history and culture. They appear in myths, legends, religious texts, and even ancient chronicles. In many cultures, these beings are described as powerful, majestic, or dangerous creatures who lived when the earth was young and humans were just beginning to exist. One of the most famous stories about giants is the biblical account of Goliath, a Philistine warrior who was defeated by David. Goliath is described as a man of gigantic stature, so tall that he was far taller than his contemporaries. His weapons and armor were so large and heavy that no ordinary man could have used them. This emphasizes the idea that Goliath was more than just a man. He was a symbol of superhuman strength and menace. Similar references can be found in Greek mythology. The Titans, who were said to be the first inhabitants of the world, were also described as beings of enormous size and strength. They were so powerful that even the Olympian gods, including Zeus, had to wage a long war to defeat them. This war, known as the Titanomachy, is another example of how the human imagination creates images of giants that symbolize the power of nature, chaos, and danger. Stories about giants are not limited to the Western world. In Norse mythology, they are known as the Jotuns, beings of extraordinary size who lived in Jotunheim, a place beyond the world of humans. The Jotuns were constantly in conflict with the gods of Asgard, acting as their enemies and allies at the same time. These giants were associated with the elemental forces of nature: ice, fire, storms. Their characteristics echo modern descriptions of giants, as the Jotuns were also strong, fierce, and isolated from the human world. No less fascinating stories are found in the mythology of South America. Inca legends mention giants who came from the sea and were so large that their heads touched the sky. According to legend, these creatures were extremely cruel and destructive until they were destroyed by divine forces. Their trace has remained not only in oral traditions, but also in some archaeological finds, which modern researchers sometimes interpret as possible confirmation of the existence of giant creatures in ancient times. Interestingly, Afghan legends about giants also have a historical basis. Local elders tell stories about the times when creatures lived in the mountains that were so huge that they could lift stones weighing several tons, building themselves shelters. Some of these stories are passed down from generation to generation, preserving details about the habits, appearance, and lifestyle of these creatures. Archaeological finds also add interesting details to the topic of the existence of giants. In different parts of the world, skeletons and bones have been found, which, according to researchers, belong to creatures much larger than an ordinary person. For example, in Africa, Asia, and North America, remains have been discovered that some scientists have tried to identify as evidence of the existence of giants. Although official science often treats such finds with skepticism, these artifacts continue to attract the attention of independent researchers and fans of historical mysteries. In addition, stories about giants have also been preserved in the culture of the indigenous peoples of America. Some tribes told about big people who lived next to them, but often showed aggression and threatened the safety of people. These giants were usually described as red-skinned creatures with long hair and incredible strength, reminiscent of modern descriptions of giants in Afghanistan. In general, we can say that stories about giants originating in different parts of the world form a common narrative that has been repeated many times throughout human history. The Afghan giants are no exception. Their characteristics, enormous height, supernatural strength, and isolation, echo the generally accepted ideas about these creatures in different cultures. This makes us wonder whether all these legends could have a common source that existed in the distant past, or whether they are a reflection of some hidden aspect of reality that remains unsolved. Ultimately, these historical parallels allow us to better understand the modern evidence of giants. They weave these stories into the fabric of ancient legends and give them weight as possible evidence for the existence of such creatures. And while many questions remain open, these stories remind us that the world is full of mysteries that are still waiting to be explained. Stories of giants are not just a thing of the past. They continue to emerge in the modern world, and one place where these tales are being revived is Afghanistan. Many soldiers who served in this mountainous country during military conflicts claim to have witnessed extraordinary events that are difficult to explain. Their stories, although they vary in detail, have several common features that make them worth paying attention to. American soldiers who participated in military operations have repeatedly reported encountering giants while patrolling mountainous areas. They described beings of incredible size, more than 4 meters tall, who had an unusual appearance. According to eyewitnesses, these creatures looked like people, but their facial features, physique, and even behavior caused a feeling of anxiety and fear. Red hair, large eyes, and 6 fingers and toes. These details are repeated in many testimonies. Among these stories, one incident stands out, which has gained wide popularity. In a remote part of Afghanistan, a group of American special forces went missing while performing a mission. After a long search, another group was sent to the region, which found traces of a struggle. Later, it became known that the soldiers encountered a giant who attacked them. During a tense battle, the team managed to destroy the creature, but it was not easy. According to the participants in the operation, this creature was extremely strong, fast, and aggressive. After the victory, its body was evacuated by military helicopters, but official confirmation of this story never appeared. Of particular interest are the testimonies of the pilots who participated in the transportation of the giant's remains. One of them recalled that he was amazed by the size of the cargo. According to him, the body he was carrying resembled a huge human figure, but it was so disproportionately large that it seemed unreal. The pilot also said that he was forced to sign non-disclosure documents and was forbidden to discuss what he had seen. These restrictions have raised even more questions among the military and independent researchers who have tried to find out the truth about these events. In addition to the military, stories about giants also come from local residents. Afghan elders often tell legends about big men who lived in the mountains. Some of them claim that even in the modern era, these creatures appear from time to time, intimidating shepherds and travelers. They describe the giants as incredibly strong and hardy creatures who can easily move along difficult mountain paths. Locals also note that the giants avoid contact with people, but if disturbed, they can show aggression. Interestingly, modern technology sometimes also becomes a tool for confirming these testimonies. For example, some military personnel claim that while observing the area with drones, they saw large figures moving quickly among the mountains. These images, although recorded, were never officially published, and the command always explained them as anomalous natural phenomena or equipment errors. Modern testimonies about the giants reinforce ancient legends, adding realism to them. Although many people may be skeptical of these stories, the coincidence in the details of eyewitness descriptions makes you think. The soldiers who served in Afghanistan had no reason to invent these stories, and their emotional testimonies inspire confidence. Perhaps giants do exist, but their existence is carefully concealed for fear of public outcry or the inability to explain the phenomenon scientifically. Thus, modern evidence adds depth and relevance to the stories of giants. These stories become not only part of cultural heritage, but also a modern mystery that arouses the interest of researchers and adventurers. The Afghan mountains continue to hold their secrets, forcing us to ask, What else do we not know about the world in which we live? Despite numerous testimonies, the evidence of the existence of giants in Afghanistan remains a mystery that is yet to be solved. Many facts and testimonies that emerge from various sources do not receive a proper explanation, and this only increases the mystery of this phenomenon. Official bodies, both local and international, refuse to comment on information about giants, which further complicates the investigation process. The emergence of new testimonies does not reduce, but rather increases the number of questions that need to be answered. These unsolved mysteries give rise to more speculation and assumptions, because each new witness who tries to tell about his observations is like throwing a new coin into the kaleidoscope of secrets. In some cases, when soldiers try to share their stories, they are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, which only fuels interest in this topic. This may indicate that some of the facts related to giants may be true, but are under strict control of the authorities in order to avoid public resonance. All this creates a situation in which people feel that they are being deceived or trying to hide the truth. Are there really creatures that should not fall into the field of public investigation? And what happens to those who try to make the truth public? Of great importance in this mystery is the very nature of the testimonies, which are often subjective in nature. Many soldiers tell of encounters with giants during hostilities, but each description differs not only in details, but also in the emotional background. Someone sees these creatures not only as terrible enemies, but also as ugly monsters, while others saw them as part of forgotten cultures or ancient civilizations that survived in the shelters of mountain ranges. However, even the military themselves often ask, why do their research and testimonies not receive official recognition? Why do stories that seem plausible not lend themselves to closer scrutiny? The answer to these questions remains open, since it is difficult to say whether this is an objective distrust of them on the part of the authorities or a real attempt to hide information for the sake of preserving national security. In addition, the testimonies often contain so much emotion and detail that it becomes increasingly difficult to distinguish truth from fiction. When pilots talk about transporting the bodies of giants, their words are incredibly accurate. Some of them note that they could not believe the size of what they saw, but each time their statements sounded equally disturbing and serious. Others claim that what they saw in the sky through binoculars was so anomalous that even modern technology could not explain this phenomenon. All this information, obtained from people who did not intend to create sensations or invent stories, only strengthens the feeling that there is more to this mystery than the official version of events can reveal. In addition, when local residents and elders talk about giants, it looks like a continuation of long-forgotten myths. In many cultures of the world, you can find mentions of giants who once inhabited the earth, and these legends often have common features. However, are these not just old tales that have been passed down from generation to generation? In this context, it is difficult to say where reality ends and fiction begins. Do these testimonies really have a real basis, or are they just the result of deep cultural memory and the virtuoso art of the storyteller? There is another interesting mystery that scientists and researchers are trying to explain. Why has none of the scientific expeditions been able to record and prove the existence of giants, despite the huge amount of evidence that has emerged? It seems that in remote and inaccessible areas of Afghanistan, there is a kind of barrier zone within which scientific methods cannot provide objective results. This can be explained by both the unstable situation in the country and the difficulty of gaining access to these regions. Perhaps there is another reason. Some creatures may have properties that cause fear and distrust among researchers. Another unsolved mystery is the lack of any attempts by governments to organize serious scientific research on this topic. Security problems in the region, ignoring important signals and silencing the facts. All this only fuels the mystery of this issue. Real research on giants could be an important step in understanding what these mountains really hide. However, so far there are only a lot of open questions to which no answers have been found. Therefore, the unsolved mystery of the existence of giants remains one of the greatest mysteries of our time. So far, this is just a growing amount of evidence hinting that real events may be much larger and more complex than we think. Ultimately, the question remains, Do we really want to know what these mountain gorges really hide, or is it better to leave this secret untouched?